Welcome back to Spooky Saturday. I'm going really strong with the upload schedule. Someone commend me because I have really bad ADHD and I'm not medicated for it. I really appreciate that you guys have been coming to my YouTube because really I just get demoralized sometimes because on TikTok you guys are already all there and then YouTube you guys aren't really here yet. So when you guys aren't here it makes me sad, but those of you who have been showing up, like, thank you so much. I seriously really appreciate the support and interaction. Oh, and the boy shows up. The boy's here. I thought I closed my door, but I evidently did not. The boy is here. Yes! Yes! The case that we're going to be discussing today is a pretty viral one, but before I get into it, I want to just make sure that I start off with a couple key disclaimers. First and foremost, this case is ongoing. It hasn't gone to trial yet, so the information that's presented in this video is all alleged information. Please do not sue me for covering this information. It's all public information. There may be information that comes out in trial that vastly changes the perception of these events. It might completely turn this entire thing on its head, and it might totally change the way we talk about this case in the future. But the information that I'm including right now is information that I have available to me as of November 2023. The next disclaimer I'd like to give is this case involves somebody who is a sex worker. While that is relevant to the case in a peripheral way, I don't want it to eclipse the actual events. So if you're gonna shame anybody involved in this story, please let it be because they've done something racist, or they've done something sexist, or they've done a violent act, or they've been abusive, or they've been toxic. There are plenty of things that you can focus on in this case and you can choose to condemn. Just please, let's keep it respectful, let's keep it mature. Now that I've gotten that out of the way, let's get into the actual case. Today we're going to be covering the case of Courtney Taylor. Her legal name is Courtney Clenney, but we're going to be calling her Courtney Taylor because that is her creator name. If that sounds familiar, it may be because you follow her on Instagram or YouTube, or you subscribe to her OnlyFans. And because of that, many people have dubbed this case the OnlyFans killer. Courtney Taylor is one of the larger creators on OnlyFans. She was actually averaging about 1.5 million a year from her OnlyFans alone. That is not including endorsements from Instagram, that's not including AdSense from YouTube, that's not including brand deals that she has across any other platform. That is just from her OnlyFans subscribers. She was also in Playboy. She was incredibly successful. She had bought her and her boyfriend an apartment in a high-rise in Miami. Apparently the rent was $10,000 a month. They have one of those cool elevators so that they just step right out of the elevator and they're at their house. I always see that in super cool movies about broke, struggling artists in New York, and I'm always like, that's gotta be like a $50 million apartment, but I digress. It seemed like everything was going really, really well for her until suddenly it wasn't. The thing that first really caught my eye about this case was not the fact that she was an OnlyFans model who committed a murder allegedly, but the fact that after doing so, she would make over $40,000. Before I get too ahead of myself, let's learn a little bit about Courtney Taylor. Who is she? Like, what's she all about? I mean, we understand what her brand is, but like, who is she as a person? I actually had no idea until I started researching her that she and I have a lot in common. I was like, what the? She's from Austin, Texas. That's where I'm from. She's not originally from there. She's actually originally from Midland. If you're not from Texas, that means nothing to you. Those of you who are from Texas, you know what I'm talking about. Smaller area, but her and her family would move to the big city. Texas has 3 major cities: Austin, Dallas, Houston. Everything in between is all relatively small towns for the most part. I know people who are like in the areas surrounding the big 3 cities are like, I can't believe you would say that. Get over it. Just keep telling people you're from the big 3, it's fine. She moved to Austin when she was like younger with her family. Her and her family were really close and they would stay close well into adulthood. She loved her mom, she loved her dad. I know whenever somebody does OnlyFans, people are like, you must hate your dad. That's not true, guys. She actually was a really sporty kid. She got super involved in a whole host of sports. Things from like horseback riding to swimming to soccer to softball. These are really expensive hobbies, especially to be doing them simultaneously. So that gives you a decent idea of how well her family was doing. On top of that, at a relatively early age, she decided that she knew what she wanted to be when she grew up. she wanted to be an Olympic diver. And most kids, they would come home, they'd be like, I want to be a marine biologist, I want to be Hercules, I want to be Superman, I want to be an engineer, I want to be a doctor. And their parents would be like, okay, cool, I hope you do that, that's awesome, sweetie. And then just kind of like, you know, not take it super seriously, because like kids change their dreams every day, you know? Not her family though. When she said she wanted to be an Olympic diver, they were like, we're gonna get you to the Olympics. They started investing a ton of time and money into this dream, and she started going hard at it. She had a ton of familial support. All her friends would come out. It was awesome. And then one day she came home and she was like, I don't want to be an Olympic diver anymore. And her parents were like, what? Why? What happened? Oh my gosh, we've invested so much into this. Why don't you want to be that anymore? And she was like, I'm afraid of sharks. Mind you, it's like in a pool. She's not like swimming in the sea. Later, she would talk about this on her YouTube. She did a lot of Q&As on Instagram and YouTube, so she actually shared a lot of her personal life. She would talk about this and kind of jest about it, like she's aware that it's an irrational fear, but it didn't matter because once she had that idea in her head, she just couldn't really get past it. She was one of those people who, like, even if she knew it was kind of silly, once she set herself on a certain course, she would stay that course until something huge would derail her. That's the only way that she was getting off that course. It had to be an unstoppable force versus an immovable object situation. And for her, the sharks were an immovable object. So she was like, screw diving, I'm over it. She would graduate high school and she was like, you know, I really want to get out of Austin. She graduated like 2 years after me. Like, I guarantee Austin is a small, big city. I guarantee I know somebody who knows this girl. Put out some feelers, see if I can find anybody. Editing Daisy might insert like a testimonial from somebody I know later in this video. We'll see over the next few days if I find anybody.
Hi guys, I go by the name of Paisley Porter. Not only am I familiar with her because she works in my industry, but I actually grew up with Courtney Taylor.
So she leaves Austin and she's like, I'm gonna go to California. And she decided that she wanted to be in entertainment, like everybody else who goes to California. She wanted to be an actor, she wanted to be a model. She always got a lot of comments on her looks. She was somebody who hit puberty really, really young. And again, like, this is all stuff that she put out there. So like, I don't feel like I'm, you know, getting too intimate with this because she did do a lot of Q&As. Because she was so into sports, she always had like a very athletic physique. So she started doing modeling and she started taking a lot of extras jobs actually, because she was trying to break into the industry. She did a lot of extras work where she would be like sorority girl number 5, and then she started posting on her Instagram and she was getting a little bit of traction. So she started researching because she had great work ethic. She started looking at like, what are other creators doing? How are people monetizing this? I want to do this, so I'm going to figure out how to do it. And that's really the way to get started, by the way, as a creator myself. If you find somebody who does similar stuff to you and you're starting to notice that you gain traction, look at their upload schedule, look at their techniques, be like, what do I need to do to get to where I want to go? So I commend her for that. She started grinding, she started noticing like, okay, a lot of the other like fit blonde girls who are doing really well on Instagram and like are Instagram models, you know, they're posting a little bit like more revealing stuff. They're getting a little skimpier with it. So I'm gonna do that too. And she started doing that, posting every single day. And then her dad reached out to her. I know this is where the haters are gonna be like, oh, see, I knew her dad was gonna be pissed. Her dad was like, dude, Playboy just posted you. Have you talked to them? Like, what? She was like, no, what? Oh my God. So they had written an article about her, basically just like promoting her for free, where it was like up and coming Instagram girls that you should follow. And they posted her and she was like over the moon. It got her like 5K new followers right away. So after that, she was like, I'm gonna start my YouTube channel. This seems like a really good time. I'm getting some traction. So she makes a YouTube channel. She starts posting like fitness vlogs, sort of like what I eat in a day, nutritional videos, and then like Q&As, like I've said. Also around this time, she was really into this one white rapper named Gerald. He hadn't really come up yet, but she was like a huge fan. And so over the course of the next few years, like he starts getting traction. He changes his artist name to G-Eazy. Someone from his team DMs her and is like, hey, I see that you're an actress and a model, you do a lot of extras work, do you want to be in this music video? And since she had been going to his shows back when he was just Gerald and like didn't have like a huge audience yet, she was hyped. Like she didn't care if she wasn't going to be on camera a lot or if she was just going to be in the very back, like she was going to go. So she goes and they start filming and they do stuff, and then after a while they're like, okay, we want all the extras to leave except for you. And she's like, me? Oh my gosh! And so then they sort of make her a featured extra where they do her giving him a cake, and she's standing up against the wall while he's like feeling himself like, ooh. That video really put her on. I mean, I think that's like his fourth or fifth most watched music video that he has. I mean, it's certainly one of his highest grossing songs. Like, I think that's the song that made me know who G-Eazy was, as well as a lot of other people. That video, I just checked, it's sitting at like 600 million views. So her just being like slightly more featured in that video was huge. I mean, that's a lot of eyes on you. So she starts gaining a ton of traction on all of her socials. Playboy is still continuously reaching out. They're like, we really want to do a spread of you, like, please agree to be naked. And she's like, no, I'm not comfortable with that. I'm just this Texas girl, dude. Like, I have simple wants. And she was in her girls next door phase. When I was researching her, I kind of broke her into a bunch of different phases. This is the girls next door phase, where like she's still being like super authentic, down to earth. She's going on and doing her Q&As, and people are like, what do you look for in a guy? And she's like, I just want somebody who's nice. Like, it would be cool if they were cute, but like that's not the most important thing, da 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 da. This would change. She would go from having like a very loose type of like, I just want somebody who's like sweet and funny, to like a very defined type, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. So this really put her on the map. Playboy's going back and forth with her, and they're giving her a lot of free promotion. So like they're doing the work to try and like get her, you know? And so she eventually agrees, like, I will do a shoot with you, just like as long as I don't have to be naked. So they do a feature of her where she's like looking hot, you know, she's in like bikini, tank tops and stuff, but like she's certainly not naked. And this really puts her on because it just furthers her sort of girls next door brand that she has at that time. This is around like 2014, 2015. Girls next doors who were like still totally unachievable, like that was sort of like the it girl of the time, like Jennifer Lawrence, where people are like, oh my God, she looks like someone I could just run into. Yeah, right. Megan Fox in Transformers, like, oh my God, she's such a girls next door girl because she likes motorcycles, even though she's like an insane 12 out of 10. I don't know. It was just, you had to be there. It was the vibe. Around this time, she kind of transitions from the girls next door vibe into more of like a bodybuilder vibe, where she's like, always been a really athletic person, but she starts taking it really seriously. She starts uploading a lot of content of her hanging out with bodybuilders and just like these super like physical, like Olympian level people who are just like training incredibly hard, and she's taking it really seriously. She's giving everyone her tips and tricks and stuff. She's like making jokes about like why her butt's so big because she did so many sports growing up, like horseback riding and stuff, and she's just trying to take it to another level. And she's really just like in her discipline era at this time. This is all, by the way, like we haven't gotten to OnlyFans yet. Like she's just an Instagram baddie and a YouTuber at this time, but that doesn't seem to be like her ultimate dream. Like she wants more. She starts selling fitness courses, and that's what takes her from like her like bodybuilder vibe into her business baddie era. But while she's in her bodybuilder era, she starts dating this guy named Sean. This whole time that she's been an influencer, this whole time she's had a platform, like one of her most popular questions are people being like, who are you dating? Like, tell us about your love life. And she would always be really vague about it. Like, I'm not really dating anybody, but she's like putting out this hopeless romantic vibe. So then she starts uploading videos, and there's like a guy just kind of casually in the background. Like she's like soft launching, if you will. And that guy's name would be Sean. Sean is not just your normal guy. He also has a following. So people start recognizing him in the background. They're like, is that Sean? Bro, what are you? Oh my God, Ariana, what are you doing here? People are like, that's clearly Sean. Thing is, this is where her first like major controversy occurs. Sean is not single. Sean has a whole girl who just had a baby. So people are like, Sean, aren't you like Mr. Olympia? Like, you have a full platform. We know your girl just had a baby. Like, what are you doing? So obviously people tell Courtney. Courtney finds out that he has a whole baby mama that he's still with, mind you. And then they break up. Simultaneously with the breakup, we don't have a lot of deets on this. No one pressed charges. But at the same time, like same day as the breakup, Sean's jaw gets broken, like fully just dislocated. People speculate, and again, this is all alleged, that Courtney must have like punched him in the face or something and broke his jaw when she found out that he had a whole other girl with a baby. After the events that would later unfold, a lot of people would want to reach out to Sean and like get his opinions on all of this, but they can't because Sean is dead. Sean died of a heart attack, completely unrelated to all of this. He had been struggling for a while. He died back in 2021. I would say may he rest in peace, but before he died, he was found guilty, R-wording a girl, and because of that, he would no longer be permitted to compete in the Mr. Olympia challenge. So Sean cannot be reached for comment to give any sort of extra context to like what the nature of his relationship with Courtney was like. Was it violent? Was it her being violent? Was it him being violent? Was it both of them? Was it just a toxic situation? Did she just lash out this one time because of like the cheating or what? We'll never know. But regardless of all of that, Courtney continues in her baddie era. In her Q&As, she would often say that she wants to be someone like Oprah one day, and that she really identifies with Oprah because Oprah has been through a lot of dark times and Courtney has been through very similar dark times, and yet Oprah has turned into this incredible like business mogul and media mogul, and Courtney really respected her for that. This is speculation as well. A lot of people speculate that by saying the Oprah thing so frequently, it was Courtney's way of sort of indicating that she may be a survivor. It's a known fact that Oprah Winfrey as a child was M-worded by family members and would actually end up becoming pregnant due to this. All of this is stuff that she has lived through and she's come to conquer, and she's come out on the other side, despite the fact that I'm sure she has a lot of mental health issues as a result. She has still ultimately come out on the other side of that and created a name for herself and created a life for herself and found great success. And for that, a lot of people do look up to her. So it could just be that like Courtney was someone who was bullied, because she did reference being bullied growing up. She actually said on socials, quote, "My hit list is very long," in reference to whether or not she had been bullied as a child. So it seems that when she was growing up, she had a lot of difficulties with her peers. So it could just be her referencing that as like her dark time that she had as a child, or it could be something more insidious. We also do not know, but I just felt like that was important to add. A lot of people also speculated that, oh, maybe that's why she would go on to do OnlyFans, because there is like a pipeline between people who have been put in those kinds of situations as children and hypersexuality in adulthood. But again, we're not Courtney's therapists. We don't know. So I'm just throwing that out there in case anybody thinks it's of interest and it's important context, but it is all speculation that I found on the internet. So take that as you will. Beyond her relationship with Sean, I wish I could say that Courtney's relationship with Sean was the last of her internet controversies, but that is not true. I told you before that in her Q&As, when she would talk about her love life, she was more of a hopeless romantic and she didn't really care about looks, and she just wanted somebody who got her and like they could laugh and have fun together. She would later go on a podcast, and it's sort of an infamous soundbite, I guess you could say. She would say that she only dates black guys and then correct herself and say, actually, I only date rich black guys. People felt like this was problematic because Courtney is white, and they felt that it was her confessing to fetishizing a certain group of men. And the conversation around like race and interracial relationships becomes pretty prominent in this case. As like a white lady, I'm not gonna tell people how they should react to Courtney's statements. Like, that's just not for me to decide. I completely see why people feel that it's like very inappropriate, and it does sound like fetishizing to me. That's just sort of like my outside looking in perspective on it, I suppose. I'm also, full disclosure, in an interracial relationship, and that's not a comment that I would ever make. It's not something that I think or believe. I think really it's just like, you date whoever you connect with. I'm not somebody who believes in the concept of a type. So for me, like, her messaging in that podcast, it's just not really something that I think or feel, so I can't really identify with her on that one. But I just felt like it's important to note that controversy because it becomes a very prominent point of discussion later as things unfold. In 2020, Courtney would discover OnlyFans, and she would make her account and she would start posting on there very, very regularly. Despite the fact that she was notably close with her family, she just did not feel comfortable disclosing that with them. So from their perspective, she was making a ton more money all of a sudden, and it was just because she was doing really well on social media. And like, they had no reason to look further into that. They knew about her Playboy shoot and stuff, and so they just thought like, okay, well, you know, like, That shoot was like 2016. It's catapulted her into a new realm. So over the last 5 years, she's just been taking that momentum and building it. Like, I don't see why not. I don't really know. I'm older. I wasn't born with social media. Who knows how any of this works? And because she had this new expendable income, she decided that she was gonna take a trip to Mexico. Classic Texas girl move. So she went to Mexico, and when she was there, she met a Texas guy. Because again, classic Texan move to be like, vacated Mexico, let's go. It's like 2 seconds away. She meets this guy, Christian Obumseli. His friends and family would call him Toby. That's his middle name. So I'm gonna refer to him as Christian, but just know like there may be other articles that refer to him as Toby. I'm only calling him Christian because like the vast majority of news sources I read refer to him as Christian. So I just feel like if you're trying to Google it afterwards, it might be confusing if you search by Toby, but just know if you see the name Toby, that's still him. It's just his middle name, and it's what his like close friends and family would call him. Got super attached to each other in the middle of the vacation, and they basically were just like instantaneously codependent. They spent the rest of the vacation together. Their friends that they had come with were like, whoa, they like really like each other. Okay, like this is something. This is a thing. And he was also like a very classic Texas boy. So he was all about like food, family, and football. And they would bond over those three things because she was also about that. A brief aside about her is like she would constantly talk about how Southern food's the best food on earth. And she loved to go mudding and stuff, and she loved the state fair. So like she's like a very classic like Texas individual. And so meeting like another guy from Texas who is also super tight with his family and also loves Southern food, and he plays football, which is like practically a religion in Texas. I'm dating an NFL player. We're both from Austin, Texas. I met him when he was playing like college football. So I fully get like the connection between them. This is just like a very classic Texas couple is what I'm trying to say. Like this is like an archetype of couples in Texas that yeah, I fall into it, you know? When I was researching this, I was like, no way. But he wasn't just like some random football player in Texas. I mean, there's like a million football players in Texas. He played for Texas Tech, which like, he played for like one of the major football schools in Texas is what I'm trying to say. So like he had to be solid. I think he transferred in, but still impressive that he made the team. And on top of that, he was doing engineering track. Everybody who knew Christian said that he was incredibly hardworking, which like you would have to be, again, you would have to be playing football at Texas Tech and doing engineering track on top of that. I mean, this is a very rigorous lifestyle this guy's living. Kyle said that he had always been really popular, even back in high school, just because like he was a really friendly guy and he was like very family oriented and he was really, really nice. He came from like a traditional Nigerian family. Some of you guys might be thinking, whoa, traditional family? How are they gonna feel about this OnlyFans thing? I mean, she didn't even tell her family. He knew off the bat that she did OnlyFans, and he went home from Mexico and he was whipping out his phone being like, this is my new girlfriend, look how hot she is. This is also his first serious relationship. From what I could tell, like he's dated maybe a couple other people before this, but like he had never had like a serious girlfriend. He wasn't really that type of guy. He was really more of like a nose to the grindstone type of personality. I mean, football takes up an incredible amount of time. And to be doing engineering on top of that, I mean, like, how much free time does this guy have? The fact that he came home and he was like really excited about a girl, his family was like, oh snap, good for you, dude. And he didn't even like stutter. He was like, this is a girl I met in Mexico. I'm in love with her. She does OnlyFans. I respect the F out of her, and I expect all of you guys to do so too, because she's an incredible person. And I don't want you guys to be judging her just because of what her job is. She's one of the most popular people on that platform. She is killing it in her industry, and I, for one, am proud of her. And his family was like so moved by like him just taking up for her right off the bat that they were like, yeah, we don't judge her, like good for you. I mean, you really like her, so we like her too. And they immediately embraced her, which is like awesome. I mean, that's what you want. When you meet somebody and you have like that intense immediate reaction to each other, you just gotta hope like all the other pieces fall into place, because otherwise it can just be a really frustrating situation, because like, you know, there's things beyond love that can complicate your relationship. But like I said, it's 2020, so the pandemic struck in March, you know. It got us all, and they decided like, dude, let's move in together, because like we want to see each other. It's not safe to just be going back and forth all the time. Like, let's move in together. So they moved in together. A lot of people note that like if you were dating someone during the pandemic, you either like make it or you break up at that time, because you're spending so much more time together than you otherwise would, because usually you have school or work. You're not spending 24/7, 365 together, but during the pandemic, you were. So if your relationship had any cracks, they were going to come out. But for them, they had a great time in quarantine. They were live, laugh, loving the entire time. People who knew them were like, they were that couple, like that couple who's just like so in love. It's couple goals, like you just want that for yourself one day. And then one day, a switch just sort of flipped, seemingly out of nowhere, where they went from being this like incredibly like doting, codependent couple to just at each other's throats, just fighting all the time. And it went from couple goals to, you know, everyone has like that friend who just fights with their girlfriend or boyfriend in public. Like every single time they ask you to hang out, you're like, oh, is Sarah gonna come too? And they're like, yeah. And you're like, okay. And you just brace yourself for the fact that like you're gonna be sitting in Denny's while they're like screaming at each other, just embarrassed to death. And like there's just nothing you can do because they don't care. You could be at the grocery store, you could be at the mall, you could be at the movies. If they want to fight, they're gonna fight, and they're gonna bring you into it also. Like, well, whose side are you on, Daisy? What do you think? And you're like, I don't want to be a part of this. Like, please. I actually wish you guys would shut up. Got to a point where like their friends were just like, they were bracing for it. They love them, obviously. Like, they're their friends. They want to keep hanging out with them, but they just knew like every time we hang out, like they're gonna fight. And more than that, Courtney is always the one to start it. She picked like 90% of the fights, and like he would rise to the occasion, you know. He wasn't exactly like conflict avoidant or anything. It was still like she would always be the one to pick the fight. Some people say that this was a result of oversensitivity because she was diagnosed with PTSD. I don't know what from. I don't know if she's diagnosed with PTSD because of what would happen later in this video or not, but I do know that she is officially diagnosed with PTSD. I myself have complex PTSD, and a symptom of PTSD can be hypervigilance. And for people who are unfamiliar with it, that sometimes looks like just being really oversensitive to tiny little things, like tiny little triggers. I don't know if that's a contributing factor here, or if she was just sort of a nitpicky person in this relationship. I feel like when you come into a relationship with like such high energy of like, I love you. You know, there's a fine line between love and hate for a lot of people. And when you're bringing that level of passion, sometimes it can turn into like putting this microscope on your partner where you just let everything get to you and you stop assuming the best, like, and you start just assuming malicious intent at every turn because you care so much about what this person thinks of you that if there's even a whisper of like, oh, they don't like me anymore, you freak out. That's at least outside looking in. It seems like that's where this all started. Even though Courtney would start these fights, it would usually be that Christian would be the one to sort of end it. Or at the very least, he'd be the one to patch things up. There's like this huge collection of letters that he wrote her over the course of their relationship. And in a lot of the letters, he would confess to like emotional abuse and toxicity. This is where things get like kind of muddy for a lot of people, where they just don't know what to think. So I'll tell you what like the two camps are saying about this, but basically his letters would say things like, I know that I'm a gaslighter, I know I've been emotionally abusive, I'm sorry, I love you, I don't want us to fight, da da da. And it would basically just be him like trying to make up with her, but he would admit to certain things. Here's where people are divided on these letters. And like, we'll see if the trial brings out like more evidence, but right now this is all we've got. Some people think that she's really the one who is gaslighting him. And like he was writing these letters because like he had been berated by her for like hours or days, and she would be like, you always emotionally abuse me, you always gaslight me, you're so toxic. That then he would include it in his letters as sort of an olive branch of like, I'm sorry, like I don't want to be these things. And so that group of people are basically saying, we think that the confessions in these letters are the result of emotional manipulation on Courtney's part. The other camp of people think that this is a toxic relationship, and generally there's not just one toxic person in a relationship like that. Even if there is somebody who's the aggressor or the main abuser, sometimes there can be reactive abuse where like someone pushes you so far that you act in ways that you wouldn't otherwise act. And so some people think that he probably was being toxic and he probably did do certain bad things. Maybe he was gaslighting sometimes, maybe he was emotionally abusive sometimes, and this is just sort of him taking accountability for his role. Could be a little bit of both. I don't know what to think personally, because I feel like I don't know these people. Now, in this next part, I'm going to establish a pattern of violence. These are just incidents that I know about because either Courtney's talked about it, Christian had talked about it in the letters or in texts from his phone to her or his friends and family. His friends and family told people about it, neighbors witnessed it, authorities witnessed it. That's like where I'm getting all this information from. Obviously, this isn't every fight they've ever had. These are just some notable incidents that we're aware of, at least. So first, we're gonna start with the Vegas trip. Courtney and Chris decided that they wanted to go on this trip to Vegas, and they went with like a group of friends. So it wasn't just them on the trip, they went with some other couples. They were staying at the Cosmopolitan Casino, and a notable thing that happened on this trip is they actually got matching tattoos of each other's names. So he got on his chest, Courtney tattooed, which is kind of crazy because the night before they had gotten in a huge fight. They had gotten in a fight because basically Christian said that he expected the Vegas trip to be more fun. Like he thought it was going to be sort of like the Hangover vibe. And really, like when they got there, the vibe was more like lounging out by the pool, trying to relax, going out at nighttime and drinking of course. But for the most part, they were just kind of like relaxing rather than like doing anything super crazy. When he had said that, Courtney took offense where she was like, oh, you don't like this trip, you don't want to be here with me, you're not having fun. And it just sort of escalated into this argument, and they would eventually go to sleep and squash it. But the next day, they went out to the pool. They were doing the same sort of thing. They were relaxing. You know, Courtney says to Christian, I'm kind of tired. I know we're supposed to go out to dinner with our friends later, so like, can we go back to the room and like, I can take like a nap and then we can get ready for dinner. And he's like, sure. And when they get back there, he starts on the same thing again, where he's just like, this trip is like so boring. Like we're old. And Courtney takes a lot of offense to this again, and just rehashes the fight from the night before, but it gets way out of control. It spirals to a point where like they literally destroy the entire room. They're arguing and he doesn't want to lie on the bed next to her. And so she gets really upset because she feels like rejected, and they just completely trash the room. Like seriously, like they threw food everywhere, there's clothes everywhere. She even threw a glass at his head, and it got to a point where they were being so loud. Mind you, this is Vegas. They were being so loud in Vegas that they got so many noise complaints, which is like, how loud do you have to be in a casino to get that many noise complaints? Like seriously. The police showed up, and when the police get there, they're asking them like, what happened? Christian says that they got in a fight because he said the trip was boring and he didn't want to lie on the bed next to her. And then she's like, no, that's not why it escalated so much. It escalated so much because he called me a beast. And then she admits to having thrown a glass at his head, which like it luckily missed. But then at that point, the police are like, you threw a glass at his head? Okay, well, obviously we have to take you in. I mean, like, what? She's arrested on domestic battery charges. And then at that point they asked Christian, has she ever tried to kill you? And he sort of paused for a while, and then he was like, no, she hasn't tried to kill me. And they're like, okay, well, we still have to hold her for at least 12 hours. She starts making a lot of excuses. Courtney actually had a rap sheet already before this, so she was really trying to avoid it at any and all costs. She was like, I want to hug my boyfriend, I don't have socks. Like she was making like random excuses and like kept asking if there were things that she could do, basically trying to like demonstrate, oh, it's fine, like we'll go back to normal, I'll stop. And the police were like, we don't care. You still have to go in holding. Then she sort of like turned on Christian, where she's like, well, I mean, like, I didn't mean to say what I said. Like, there was a lot of things that he did that led to that I didn't want to say because I didn't want to get him in trouble. Like, I didn't tell the whole story because I didn't want him to get in trouble. And they're like, okay, what's the whole story then? She's like, well, I don't want to say because I still don't want him to get in trouble. Like, please let me go. And they're like, no, girl. And those statements made by Courtney, they would actually prove to be really important for her defense team later, because they would cite that moment and they'd be like, see, this is an example of her trying to like cover up for her abuser. Like she didn't want him to get in trouble. Like she used to do that all the time. And they would also reference her Instagram. She would often post videos or stories where she would be covered in bruises. But like the thing with the bruises is her followers, like they didn't really seem to like notice, or if they did notice, like they didn't really care. She would go on her story regardless of that, and she would be like, oh my gosh, I bruise so easily, I swear I'm like a peach. And like this is what her defense team claims. that she would do that because she's trying to dismiss any comments anyone might make about the bruises in connection with her boyfriend before they make them. Trying to get ahead of it, like, oh my gosh, like, I'm totally fine. And that this is just further evidence that there's a pattern of her trying to cover up for her abuser. Meanwhile, the opposition claims that she would make those posts on her story like, oh my God, guys, like, don't even mind the bruises, after like no one was minding them anyway, because she was trying to call attention to it without making it look like she was trying to call attention to it. Speculation. We don't actually know what's inside the mind of Courtney, only Courtney knows. The next notable incident would happen from October 9th to the 11th. I'm calling this the October fight. Courtney thinks that Christian's cheating on her. So she starts bombarding him with texts. She starts accusing him like, I know you're cheating on me. And she was already like a very possessive individual. Her friends would attest that like she had a rule where if he even talked to a woman throughout the day, even if it was someone she knew, even if it was one of her friends, that he had to disclose that to her. Otherwise she would freak out. And so he like allegedly agreed to this arrangement. This would escalate to a point where she actually beats him with a phone. For some reason in my mind, I'm picturing like a landline, but I know that there's just like no way that's true. So I'm assuming she's beating him with like an iPhone, like she's hitting him in the head with an iPhone. Then at some point, we don't have a lot of details on this, she ends up stabbing him in the leg. Yeah, it's already like completely unacceptable to get to a point of violence with your partner, let alone where you're like beating them with a phone. But stabbing somebody is just on a whole other level. That is such an insane red flag. Brief aside to the audience, if you're dating somebody and they throw things, and they're throwing things in the house, they break things in the house, just know that that's like a big red flag that like they are completely capable of doing that to you as well. It almost always escalates to somebody enacting violence on you if they're enacting violence on things that are near you, because that's their way of showing like, this could be you. If somebody stabs you, you have got to get out of there. I mean, that is like a breath away from murder. It's just, and stabbing someone in the leg, you could hit a major artery in their thigh. If you do that, you could kill them. And what makes me really extra sad about this incident with his leg is like, he would text her the next day and he'd be like, you know, even though you literally stabbed me in the leg yesterday, I just woke up feeling like so grateful about how remorseful that you felt over stabbing me in the leg. And I love you. Basically saying that it just like meant a lot to him that she felt bad about stabbing him in the leg, and referencing a moment where I guess she had said like, oh, I wish I could just take the pain away. It should have been me. And he just was just talking about how like he was still, despite all of this, happy to wake up next to her. And he detailed all of these things that he went and did for her the next day, even though his leg hurt super bad. It's just really, it was really sad text. It made me really sad. But unfortunately, things would obviously continue to escalate from there. There's an incident where they were caught on CCTV footage because this happened in their elevator, their private elevator. So they started fighting in the lobby of their building. No one really knows why this fight occurred, but a lot of neighbors witnessed this. Strangers videotaped it. A lot of people tried to intervene, and of course it was caught on CCTV footage, but no one really knows what kicked off the fight. There was a text prior to this where he said, yes, Courtney, and then she was sort of like triggered by that, where she just thought that it was being rude and disrespectful. So I don't know if the text triggered the fight or if they were already, you know, fighting outside of text about something, but clearly things were not going well. Again, like, it's in public. It's in the lobby of the building that they live in. Like, they're doing this all in front of their neighbors. And by the way, this is in their apartment in Miami. They had moved to Miami because they wanted a fresh start, and they were living in this incredible apartment. It was $10,000 a month. They had the private elevator. They had panoramic views of the ocean. They were living their best lives, basically, and Courtney was paying for all of it. She was the one who was paying for the rent every single month. She was paying for the utilities, and she had furnished the place from what I can tell. I don't think it came furnished, but I couldn't find any information on that in particular. But this was supposed to be like a fresh start for them. You know, they had already been bickering a lot, and they had agreed, you know, when we move to Florida, we're not gonna fight. We're not gonna yell. Our neighbors aren't gonna, you know, think that we're the crazy couple. Obviously, all of that went completely out the window because people who lived 12 stories below them, they lived on the 22nd floor. People 12 stories below them could still hear them, and they would attest to the fact that they clearly had a domestic violence problem. The fight ended up escalating to such an extreme extent that Courtney would actually slice Christian in the face twice, and he would have to go to the hospital. And while he was in the hospital, he was texting her, and she was saying things like, you know, I'm tired of having to show you how to behave. You always gaslight me. You always do this. You always do that. Let this be a lesson to you. Enjoy your time in the hospital. Just really callous. She wasn't exhibiting any guilt at this time. And she actually ended up going out with another guy while he was in the ER. She didn't even visit him in the hospital. She just left him there and went out with another guy. It's important to note that Courtney seemingly had some addiction problems with alcohol and substances. And later, Christian would say over text that she had cheated on him, and she wouldn't deny that. I don't know if this was when she first cheated, going out with this guy, or if she had cheated multiple times, or if she cheated after this and like this was just a guy friend. I don't have any details on that, but worst case scenario, she had just sliced this man in the face. He's in the hospital and she's out hooking up with another guy. Christian's at like an emotional rock bottom. I mean, I seriously really feel for this guy in this situation. He's at an emotional rock bottom. He's texting her being like, even though you literally sliced me in the face, all I can still think is like, I wish you were here with me, and like you're out with some other guy, like you don't even care, like you're not worried about me, like this is so messed up. Instead of getting like worried that like she's being a terrible girlfriend, she starts getting worried that he's gonna like tell on her. So she's like, make sure you tell the doctors that it was an accident. And despite all of this, despite all that she's doing, he texts back where he's like, yeah, I just told them it was a football accident. So really, from what information we have right now, again, this might change when things go to trial, but given the information we currently know, the incomplete information we currently know, it seems that there's actually more of a pattern of Christian covering up for Courtney's abuse than the other way around. It seemed that Christian actually had finally started to wise up to the fact that this was an incredibly dangerous situation. He even texted Courtney, you're so violent with me, you hit me all the time, you always hurt me. It's at this point that Christian does something very smart and very important. He starts secretly recording Courtney henceforth. There's a little bit of controversy surrounding these recordings because Courtney looks really, really bad in them. And a lot of people who are team Courtney for, again, some reason. I personally, as of right now, with the information I currently have, I am not team Courtney. It's not looking good for Courtney. Even if information were to come out to exonerate Courtney in this case, I am still not team Courtney because Courtney seems to be a racist, to be frank. Beyond like the fetishization of Christian, she would also often call him the N-word, hard R, in their arguments. Every time that she was upset, she would call him that. And she would say a lot of other horribly disgusting, racially motivated things. So even if it turns out that Courtney, you know, did what she would ultimately do in self-defense, fuck you, Courtney. You know, like, it sucks that you might be a victim of DV, but you're also an asshole separately from all of that. So I'm not team Courtney, just regardless, and I just wanted to get that off of my chest because there is no world, it doesn't matter what is happening, there's no world wherein you should be saying that. If somebody is treating you like, if somebody is exhibiting toxic, abusive behavior, don't call them the N-word, leave that person. And I don't want it to sound like I don't understand DV. It takes like, on average, at least 7 attempts to finally fully leave somebody. So I'm not saying like the second somebody shows bad behavior, if you don't drop that person, you're the problem. Of course not. Like, have some critical thinking, have some sympathy, have some empathy. I've never even been mildly tempted to call somebody that, you know, like there's no place for that in our world, in my opinion. It's just not necessary. That being said, people who are team Courtney find Christian's evidence against her to be slightly problematic in that he's the only one who's aware of the recording. And in these recordings, he's very calm, he's collected, he's trying to de-escalate. In all of the recordings, he's trying to de-escalate. He's apologetic. He's trying to like smooth over whatever's happening. He's trying to avoid violence at all costs. And so people who are team Courtney, they're like, oh, well, he's just doing that to make himself look good because he knows he's compiling evidence. That's possible, but also in like CCTV footage and all the other evidence we have up until this point that isn't evidence that Christian himself has compiled, and just going off of testimonials from their friends and neighbors. Right now, still looks like Courtney is the main aggressor and the main abuser in this relationship. This brings us to February of 2020. Courtney and Christian go out with their friends, and apparently all is well when suddenly Courtney gets into a disagreement with one of Christian's friends. It's speculated that she is on some sort of substance when all of this is happening. At the very least, it sounds like she's intoxicated, but she also had a real problem with snorting Pepsi. Sorry, YouTube monetization. She had a problem with Pepsi consumption, so she may have been indulging in that as well. I don't know. There's not a toxicology report associated with this incident. She got into a fight with one of their mutual friends, and Christian took the side of the friend instead of Courtney's. This sends Courtney into an absolute rage. I don't know what the initial disagreement was about with the friend, if it was something important, if it was something unimportant, but allegedly Christian says like, oh, come on, don't be stupid, which just makes matters insanely worse. She was already upset with him because she felt like he wasn't being supportive because he didn't take her side, let alone didn't take her side in public. But the fact that he also made a comment about her being stupid just sent her into an absolute blind rage. There's audio of this available online if you guys want to listen to it. It's pretty upsetting. I would have put it in here, but I honestly just felt like it was too triggering, to be real with you. Authorities refer to this incident as a psychotic episode because of how intense Courtney is being, and the juxtaposition between her and Christian, it's really upsetting, it's really disturbing. So I just didn't want to put it in there just in case anybody has experienced domestic violence. I don't want to just like throw this at you and have you hear it and have it be like a triggering situation for you. But if you are curious, I'm sure other people have uploaded it on YouTube. Additionally, in the audio, you can hear that she is slapping Christian and he's saying, stop hitting me and stuff. So I don't know if she's slapping him in the face or what. It doesn't really matter, you know, but she is landing blows. You can audibly hear them. He's asking her to stop. She's refusing. She's like banshee screaming the whole time. They left her dogs in the car. He's trying to get her to get back in the car. She decides that she's upset about her dogs being in the car, even though like she knew they were in the car. He had cracked the window for the dogs when he's trying to get her in the car. And she's upset about that, where she's like, what if my dogs had jumped out? And she just starts like focusing on that, and he's like, I'm sorry, my bad, like I don't want your dogs to run away, I just want you to get in the car. And she's like hyper fixated on the dogs. And then a stranger approaches and is like, are you guys in a relationship? Just basically trying to see like what's going on because she's screaming so incredibly intensely. He tries to de-escalate the situation as well. Courtney's not really having it. Courtney and Christian separate physically, and she's talking to this other guy. He's going back and forth. He's being a gent about it, to be real, where he's like, you know, like I also have a relationship. Everyone has like their bad moments, you know, but like I just want to make sure everybody's okay. Like, is everyone safe? Like, are you know, like what's going on? And like he tries to basically like calm things down because of how extreme it is. After this, they make their way back to their apartment building, and they're caught on CCTV again, where they're in the elevator and she's just relentlessly beating on Christian, and he's like a lot bigger than she is, but she's not like weak, you know, she works out, so like her blows, like they're still gonna hurt, but he's not hitting her back or anything. The only thing that he does is he eventually puts her in a headlock just to kind of like try and restrain her, you know? And so this is another example of like, this isn't evidence that like he's directly collecting, and yet it still reinforces the idea that like he's trying to be preservative with how he deals with her. And this footage is like crucial to this case, because what this footage does is this footage proves that Courtney is an abuser. It doesn't disprove whether or not Christian's an abuser, but it does prove definitively that she is an abuser, because we are witnessing the assault. We know that she has at least abused Christian one time, and this is in addition to her admitting to throwing that glass at his head, but in that incident like she missed, so technically like she didn't land a blow. But in this situation, she is landing blows repeatedly, and she's screaming and yelling. And so this footage alone, I do not know how her defense is going to try and spin this. I don't know if it's going to stick, but it is key to this case because it does prove that there's at least one verifiable incident where she had abused Christian before everything happened. The next day, Christian texts her and he says, I'm gonna paraphrase because it's a long text, but this is just like a mix of quotes where I'm just like abridging it basically, but like everything I'm gonna say, he did say. It's just like there was a lot of stuff in between. I woke up feeling stupid. Like, am I gonna die for love? I've sacrificed so much. What if the knife had got in my eye? What will happen next? He then starts talking about how February has been the worst month of his life. And he starts listing all of the things that he's experienced just in this month alone. He had been cheated on. He had been called the N-word again. He says, quote, "You called me that word again." But it's in reference to the N-word from other evidence. "You slapped me in the stitches until they burst open. You kicked me out of your apartment. You destroyed our apartment." By destroyed, investigators think that he means that they lost their lease, because like physically the apartment was like messy, but it was like okay. But because there had been so many domestic incidences, they had actually been evicted. And so just 3 days before the incident that we're gonna be covering, they were served an eviction notice. After this situation, they break up. Courtney breaks up with him and she says like, you know what? I'm paying for everything, so you have to leave. She keeps all his stuff though. Her name is the only name on the lease, but all of his things are in the apartment. This is relevant because even though he's not paying for anything in the apartment, according to Florida law, she can't get him to evacuate the apartment unless he wants to, like unless he agrees to. The apartment building might be able to intervene and break her lease so that she can leave and then just sign a new lease without him in it. That's like supposedly the workaround, but the police can't come and like escort him out of there basically. This is relevant because after she kicks him out, he starts like sleeping in the lobby. Every once in a while, he sleeps in like the foyer, because like their private elevator, it comes up to like a little room that's like just only they can access before going into their main apartment. And so he would sometimes follow her into the elevator if he caught her fast enough, and he would sleep in that little room before she would like kick him out again. He was allowed to like get some of his clothes from the apartment and stuff, but like he wasn't allowed like free reign, and like it's speculated that she took his keys. And at this point, Courtney calls her mom from Texas. She flies down and like she's supposed to like help her go through with the breakup basically, but like they're not moving out any of his stuff. It seems like to me that it was just more of a moral support thing. Her mom was like very enmeshed with her in terms of her love life. Like it was a common occurrence that if like Courtney and Christian were having a full level like screaming match, she would run over and call her mom and put it on speakerphone and then be like, whose side is right? What do you think? Which like, so inappropriate. Like don't do that. That is like unacceptable. Like that is not, don't bring other people into your like intense relationship moments like that, let alone like your parents. Christian's sleeping in the lobby. He's like going in and out and stuff. And like eventually security calls the cops because they see him chase after her to get in the elevator, and they say that he like rushed after her, and because he's like a big guy, he's like a football player and stuff, like it just like was a bad look, and they had seen him sleeping in the lobby and other residents had started to complain, and like he can't just like do that, you know. So they called the police, and when the police came, Courtney was like super intoxicated, and they were like, do you want us to do anything? She was basically like, you know, he's stalking me, he's doing this, he's doing that. And they're like, oh, so you don't want him to live with you anymore? And she's like, no, not necessarily. And they're like, do you want to press charges? And she's like, no. And then she's like, actually, yes, like since he's stalking me, I want him out of my apartment. And they're like, well, we can't really do anything because all his stuff is here. So like, we can't like say that he doesn't live here just because you're the only one paying the lease. By like Florida law, you gotta talk to your building about that. Like we can't like physically remove him and stuff. And she's got her mom on speakerphone, getting her mom involved again. And it's all really confusing because she keeps reiterating to both the building and the police that she doesn't want him kicked out of the building, but that she does want a restraining order against him and that she is being stalked by him. She keeps saying like, you know, I don't know if I'm the victim overall, but I'm the victim this time, which is a really weird statement to make. And like building security also said that like in this situation it seemed that like Christian was the aggressor, so I'm assuming her defense is probably gonna like lock onto this specific situation because it's the one situation where like all the witnesses were like, oh, he's the aggressor, but he never like laid hands on her. It was just the way he ran at her. Everybody thought it was scary. Basically, the police keep asking like, why are you scared? Like, has he done something in the past? Like, what is he doing that's scaring you? And she just doesn't give any sort of straight answer. Again, that could be because she's intoxicated. It could be because she doesn't have anything to say. It could be because she's covering for him. We don't really know. She does have bruises on her body at this time that the police observed, but also she's an alcoholic. So they're like, is this because she drinks a lot and she falls? Is this because somebody is hurting her? We don't know. She's not really telling us anything that we can use to try and figure that out. So like, who knows what's going on, but it is noted. Now we are officially at the day that the murder actually happened. Sunday, April 3rd, 2022. Evidently, Christian and Courtney put their differences aside. They decide to get back together. They're still living in the same apartment, even though they have been given papers telling them that they need to leave. They don't have to leave yet, or I guess they haven't left yet at this point in time. The day starts out actually pretty nice. Apparently, when they got back together, they had a real heart-to-heart, and they were like, we're never gonna put our hands on each other again. We're never gonna be in this volatile situation again. I'm gonna stop being so crazy, you're gonna stop being so crazy, and we're gonna take this seriously and go forward into a happy relationship together. Apparently this is something that both of them really, really wanted. They wake up and they're dancing around the apartment in the morning. We know this because Christian is videotaping Courtney and he's like hyping her up while she's dancing around. And they have a nice morning together. She decides to do some laundry. She's listening to true crime. I think a lot of people can relate to doing those activities at the same time. You might even be listening to me right now while you're doing some chores around the house. I know that's what I do. They decide they're hungry, so Christian's like, you know what, I'll go to Subway, I'll get us some sandwiches, I'll be right back. I don't know if he walked or biked because he did frequently do both. Before he left, he repeated her Subway order to her where he's like, I know what you like, it's this, right? And she was like, yes. And then he heads out to go get the sandwiches. While he's gone, she hops on Instagram Live, she starts doing a Q&A. People are asking her things like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And she's saying like, you know, I see myself married with some kids and a couple houses, and I hope my career is doing better than ever, although I probably won't be on OnlyFans in 5 years. She gets off Instagram Live and she goes to check Find My iPhone. Well, they had broken up. They had both disabled the feature where she didn't want him tracking her, he didn't want her tracking him. And neither of them had turned it back on yet. And despite the fact that Courtney didn't have hers turned back on either, she flew into a blind rage when she realized that Christian had left the house and she didn't know where he was. Mind you, she did know where he was. He was going to Subway, as promised, but she was like, what if he stops along the way and he hooks up with some other girl? Who knows? There was even one time in the past where he had gone on a bike ride and he'd run into one of her friends and said hi to her friend, and then he forgot to tell her when he came home that he saw her friend. And then when said friend later mentioned like, oh yeah, I saw Christian earlier today, she freaked out because she was like, you're supposed to tell me every time you talk to a girl, even if it's one of my friends. I know you want to hook up with her. You've always thought she was hot. There's already a precedent for her having like this kind of freak out over this kind of thing. So she's spam calling him and he's not answering. He ends up being gone for 40 minutes, which sounds like a lot of time, but if he had biked, it would have taken him 6 minutes one way to get to Subway. If he had walked, it would have taken him 15 minutes one way. Who knows how busy it is? So it's like, it could have taken him 30 minutes there and back if he walked, and then he's in the store for like 10 minutes. It's not like a damning timeline, is what I'm trying to say. She takes a break from Sam calling him and she's on Instagram Live, and then she gets off and she's like, okay, I'm gonna call him one more time. Literally even says like, okay, well, I'm gonna ditch you guys. I'm gonna go eat Subway now. Calls him, he actually answers this time. She's like, dude, why don't you have your Find My iPhone on? He's like, you don't either. Like, we turned it off when we broke up. We just got back together like literally 2 seconds ago. And she's like, okay, well, turn it back on. And he's like, okay, well, you turn yours back on. And she's like, fine. And so then they start eating their Subway sandwiches, and it's kind of tense. They're just kind of sort of picking at each other while they're picking at their food. He makes like a comment under his breath where he's like, why don't you go find one of those G-Wagon guys? Because I guess it's a callback to a previous fight that they had had, where she was like, I'm the hot one, I'm the rich one. I could easily go out and bag one of those guys in Miami who drives a G-Wagon. Who are you gonna bag? Like, I'm the best you're gonna get, whereas like, you're just someone I can get. Like, I could do better. When he made that comment, she like flew into a rage. Like, that triggered her. In fact, the resulting escalation was so extreme that from this point forward, everything that happens is alleged by Courtney. So we don't get Christian's side of things. We don't know how much of this is true or not true. We don't know how much of it is gonna end up being just like a he said, she said, or if during the trial, people come out with more evidence, because there was somebody who lived in a high-rise across the way who actually did get some footage of Courtney through her windows. The footage that we're aware that they have is after everything has happened, but who knows if maybe they recorded the whole thing. Like, we don't know. We don't know if them or somebody else has that kind of footage. We just don't know. But from here forward, this is all Courtney's testimony. She says that the escalation was so extreme that it resulted in him strangling her multiple times. She would get away, he would strangle her again, and then he ends up pinning her up against a wall while choking her. She then somehow escapes, and she runs over to the counter and she calls her mom. Her mom's on speakerphone, and her mom's apparently saying things to like the effect of like, you guys are toxic, you shouldn't be together, I knew you shouldn't have gotten back together, da 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 da, don't hurt each other, blah blah blah. Nothing really like inherently problematic from the mom, but again, still like, why is the mom involved? Speaking of the mom, for Christmas that year, she had given Courtney a set of knives, cooking knives, and Courtney picked up one of those knives. It was a serrated knife, not like a bread knife, but like for cutting meats and stuff. And she picks up the knife. She's still on the phone with her mom on speakerphone, so her mom can hear all of this. She basically claims that she only picked up the knife because she was trying to scare him, to keep him back. And at that point, he was like 10 feet away or so. And Courtney claims that while he's like 10 feet away, and he's yelling, he does something that scares her. So she throws the knife towards him. She just throws the knife. And when she does this, it lands in his chest directly below the Courtney tattoo. Remember that, because we will be circling back to that specific placement in a little bit, but let me just finish this series of events first. After the knife goes into his chest, she realizes what she's done. Her mom's still on the phone. And she's screaming like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Oh, I'm so sorry, baby, I'm so sorry. He's like, call somebody. And then she, for some reason, drags him into the laundry room closet. We know this because like he was losing a ton of blood. She hit an artery, and so there's like a clear blood trail that goes into there. Also, the knife is removed somehow. She says that she didn't remove the knife. She actually says something to the effect of, if you've ever seen Game of Thrones, you know not to rip the knife out. If she did remove the knife, that comment right there is just proof that like she knew she was intentionally worsening the situation. But she says that she did not remove the knife. So it's not clear if when she threw it, it went in and then out, or if like when she was moving him, it like fell out somehow. But the wound is like 3 inches deep. So I'm not so sure that it could be easily dislodged, but again, I'm not an expert. Maybe it could. Maybe someone in the comments is gonna be like, actually, 3 inches is the prime depth for a knife to naturally fall out. I have no idea. If you know that, let me know. The timeline from this moment forward is very important. 4:46 p.m. Other residents in the building report that there is a domestic dispute happening because they're hearing screaming, yelling, crying. Sounds like a violent situation. During this time, somewhere around here is when the stabbing happens. Courtney's mom is still on the phone during and after the stabbing. The call is somehow disconnected at 4:49. Instead of calling the police, Courtney calls her mom back at 4:56. Courtney calls her mom back, and then at 4:56, she hangs up on her mom. Meanwhile, the whole time in the background, Christian is yelling like, call somebody. He's still conscious, although his eyes are low, like he's almost falling asleep, but she's keeping him awake. She's apologizing, she's screaming, she's crying, but she's not calling the police. 4:57, nearly 10 minutes later, she calls 911. And only then are people dispatched to go and help him. This is important because I remember hearing like years ago that it takes like 10 minutes to fully bleed out if someone stabs you in the stomach. And that's the stomach. I would assume getting stabbed directly in the chest is worse. EMS arrives at the scene a little while later, and they're focused on Christian. No one's really like getting Courtney's testimony at that time, but like in the background, she's like hyper fixated on her dogs. Like she's worried her dogs are gonna get out. She's like focused on her dogs instead of Christian. The person who recorded from across the way, this is where their videotape comes into play. She's like covered in blood, and she's like following her dogs around the apartment instead of like tending to Christian. So that kind of corroborates this testimony. Christian is obviously rushed to the hospital, and shortly after, he is pronounced dead. At this point, the police on the scene are turning their attention to Courtney, And they also note that she is more focused on the dogs and that there's an extreme amount of blood present in the apartment. They say the apartment was also very messy, but it's hard to know if the apartment was messy as a result of this domestic dispute or if it was already like that. Hard to tell, but they did say there was an extreme amount of blood, like a truly shocking amount of blood on the scene. So they take her in for questioning, and she mentions pretty early on like that she wants an attorney. And like some people have beef with this part where they feel like the way this investigation was conducted in this moment was like pretty unethical, because she like states that she would like an attorney, but she doesn't outright ask for an attorney. She more so says like, I want to call my dad so my dad can call my attorney. So it's, I guess that's like a loophole. I don't know. Like, I really hope there's not like a mistrial over that particular element. She didn't outright ask, and so then they keep pressuring her and like talking to her, and she basically just starts answering questions. And while they're asking her questions, she's like, okay, well, how is he doing? Is he alive? She keeps like asking if he's alive, and the police are like, yeah, he's alive. And she's like, oh good, Christian's alive. And they're like, who? Which I think is weird, but they're like, who? And she's like, Christian? And they're like, oh, the victim? Sorry, I didn't get his name. Okay. They're like, yeah, he's alive, which like at that time he was, but then they're informed partway through that he is no longer alive, and they let her continue to believe he's alive. And she even makes a comment at one point where she's like, oh good, like good thing he's alive, not just because like I love him and I want him to live, but it's also probably better for me if he's alive, right? Basically, like, it's giving, he's gonna get me out of this because he always makes excuses for me. That's like my personal like take right now, but like again, I might change my mind when they go to trial. Maybe she's like a victim and I'm gonna look like a total jerk after this trial. You know, it might turn out that like he's like a master manipulator, I don't know. But given the information we have right now, not looking good for Courtney. It's at this point that the police start pointing out some inconsistencies where they're like, you said he strangled you, but then like, why would he just like let you leave to go call your mom and pick up a knife if he was strangling you? Like, that's just not really, like, that's weird. Why would he do that? And she's like, I don't know. And they're like, neither do we. You don't think that doesn't make sense? And after they wear her down for a few hours, they finally tell her like, Christian's dead. So she starts like crying, and she does a few weird things. Like she asks the police for a hug, and they're like, ugh. And then she's like, okay, well, can my mom come in so like she can hug me? It's just kind of like a bit of an odd reaction. I mean, I don't know what the normal reaction is to finding out that you killed somebody. So like, there is that. And then the cops are like, can you give us Christian's parents' names so we can contact them? And then Courtney is like, oh, I don't remember their names. I've like met them a bunch of times and talked to them like a ton, and like we've hung out. I just like don't remember their names really. I don't know if this is because of shock or if she's just like an inconsiderate person, or she just didn't want them to be contacted as soon because she was like ashamed or something. But what would end up happening, and I don't know if this is a result from her not giving them the names, because like surely they're in like the system and they could have contacted them, but the police never inform Christian's parents that he's been murdered. The way that Christian's poor mother finds out that he's been killed is because the morgue calls her, and they're calling to ask if they can collect his organs for donation. That's got to be like the worst possible way to find out that your child has died, is somebody's like, hey, can we keep their organs? Like, what the f-? She was at work and they called her and they asked her that. And so she's confused. She's like, obviously there's been a mistake. Like, my son's not dead. And they're like, yes, he is. And then they confirm his identity and they're like, the police didn't call you? And she's like, no. So that's how she finds out that her son is not only dead, but he's been murdered by someone she knows, by his girlfriend. That's how she finds out that information. Allegedly murdered. So his family starts contacting the police for further information, and the detective, who's a total jerk, literally so bad at his job, like he should get fired, seriously. He tells them like, listen, I have a lot going on right now. I'm trying to figure out this case. I'm investigating. Stop distracting me. I'll give you an update when it's time. And he gets back to them like 24 hours later, and he's basically like, well, it was a cut and dry case. He's obviously a domestic abuser. And they're like, what evidence do you have to that? And the officer is literally like, oh, well, we talked to her and she said that he was a domestic abuser and that it was self-defense. So it was self-defense. Like, doesn't even bother to like look into it at all. This is where like race comes into this discussion again. A lot of people feel like the optics involved are the reason why like she was able to be just running around free for 4 months after this all happened and make $40,000 additional dollars from her OnlyFans, because she was still posting every single day after stabbing her boyfriend, resulting in his death. Every single day she was still posting on OnlyFans, and she made $40,000 doing that. $10,000 a month after stabbing someone fatally, after fatally stabbing someone. They didn't even bother looking into it. They were just like, yeah, we believe her. And a lot of people think like, oh, it's because it's a white woman and he was a tall, fit black man. And so they're just like, oh, of course. The other thing people really are upset with investigators about, the investigators didn't even collect evidence at the scene. They didn't think to take any pictures, despite the fact that she said she'd been strangled. No one took any pictures of her neck. There's no bodily evidence. They don't collect any additional evidence at the scene. It's really just like an absolute botched job. The other thing I feel obligated to mention, because I did bring up Courtney's fetishizing comments, a lot of people, when this story broke, went into Christian's social media and they found some old tweets from him that are just not good. They're just not good. There's a lot of colorist tweets that he made disparaging black women, saying that he would never date a black woman, that he only wants white women, and just really unfortunate statements. And because of that, there have been a lot of people who have come out and basically said like, he got what he deserved. I don't feel like it's my place to comment on the appropriateness of those comments. It seems kind of cold. I feel like that's the most I can say, but you know, it just doesn't seem in my lane to decide like how one should react to those comments. I'm not a black woman. I'm not the person he was talking about, so I don't feel like I can be like, it's forgivable or it's unforgivable. You know, it's just not really my lane. What I can say as a white woman who's in an interracial relationship is that I would never want to date somebody who makes comments like that. To me, that just means that somebody is objectifying and fetishizing me, and I don't want somebody to look at me as a prospect instead of a person. You should never want that. And ultimately, I think that if they were both looking at each other as objects, that could have absolutely been a contributing factor to the volatile nature of this relationship. It's never acceptable to make comments disparaging black women, or really any group of people for that matter, but just keep in mind, like, when you're saying those things, like, that's a stone that could easily be cast at your own daughter in the future. And you need to be the change you wish to see in the world. Don't put things out in the universe like that. It's just not okay. So I'm just mentioning that for the sake of symmetry, since I did highlight Courtney's podcast comments, and because both of their previous comments about race and dating preferences do have a massive impact on the cultural conversation surrounding this case. Anyway, Courtney is not arrested, which is both odd and surprising. And it's odd because even somebody who very clearly was committing a violence or a killing as an act of self-defense, they're still usually arrested, and they're usually still treated like a murderer until definitive proof that this was absolutely self-defense. So it is strange that they just kind of let her go because she just said so. Again, this is why people are like, the power dynamics clearly had an effect. Her defense is claiming that she has been the victim of domestic violence for years, and this was just her committing self-defense, whereas like friends and neighbors all still maintain that she was in fact the aggressor in this relationship, at least from what they can tell. Even though the case has not gone to trial yet, investigators have already begun to debunk some of her claims. So she claimed that she threw the knife and it got him in the chest, and when she threw it, she wasn't even thinking about like where it's gonna land. She was just like scared and threw it. Whereas people have now gone and practiced on cadavers, and they're maintaining that like it's just not possible. Like, maybe she's an expert knife thrower, but even still, the force that the knife hit him with and the depth of the knife into his chest, especially since he was somebody who had a lot of musculature, and the angle of the wound all point to a face-to-face downward stabbing motion. So people are basically debunking, like, there's no way she threw it from 10 feet away. She would have had to like go up to him or been on top of him and stabbed him. Now, I don't know the level of expertise that these investigators have. I don't know if this is solely what they do. I just read that they have already begun debunking that claim, and this is the conclusion that they have come to. So maybe we'll get some more information on that in trial as well. But since Courtney wasn't arrested right away, she goes to Hawaii. She goes to Hawaii and she goes to a mental health rehab. While she's in the rehab, they do diagnose her with alcohol and Pepsi addiction, as well as PTSD. And this specific rehab, it costs $35,000 a month. So this is almost like a resort style experience. I do think it's like important to touch on, again, like people are speculating that like he deserved it based off the information that we currently have. And I think that just like says a lot about the cultural conversation around this case. We know for a fact that Courtney has done a certain amount of abusive things. We know that she stabbed him, sliced his face, beat up on him. We know that for sure. It's still a question what Christian may or may not have done in this relationship, but we do know at least some of what Courtney's done, and all of those things like are unforgivable things. Like you should not tolerate any of those things in a relationship. So the fact that like people are even trying to make this look like a symmetrical case with the information we have right now, I think that says a lot about how like people tend to demonize black men in America, and it's just really like, it's really sad to me. It really is like, it's very distressing to me. Okay, but what if he did this, or what if he did that, or what if blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, we know for sure what Courtney's done so far. I think it's fair to be like, maybe Christian has done some things. We'll have to wait and see. But I just don't really think it's fair to be like, oh, I can tell from his letters he's a master manipulator, or he's a gaslighter, or he's this, or he's that, when ultimately, given the information we have right now, it looks like Christian is a victim. It looks like this is an example of domestic violence against a man. And just because somebody is big and strong doesn't mean that like they can't be a victim of somebody who is smaller. That's that kind of thinking, that kind of mentality is why male victims of SA or R word don't come forward, because they feel like they're going to be shamed publicly for it, because they feel like people are going to be like, why didn't you just push her off? And I know for a fact women can absolutely domestically abuse their partners, both physically and emotionally. When there's examples of male victims, which again, like this is all alleged, so we don't know for sure that Christian is, but if it turns out that everything we know right now is absolutely true and our perceptions are not changed once trial happens and there's no new facts that come out that really like change the way that this picture has come together, it's really sad that like there's just this tendency to not take male victims seriously, because it is a serious thing. It's absolutely a serious thing, and we should take it just as serious as we take female victims. Females are more often the victims of violence, that's true, but when men are victims of violence, we shouldn't act like it somehow doesn't matter or it's less important. Like, I wouldn't want my boyfriend to be a victim of something and then people don't take him seriously or they laugh at him. Or if my brother was a victim of something, people didn't believe him or thought he's probably just lying and projecting what he's done. You know, like that's just, or like my friends. I have a lot of guy best friends. I love all of the men in my life. I have like a really great group of guys around me, and it would just like absolutely break my heart if something like this were to ever happen to any of them. And it would be really, really, really absolutely like mentally and emotionally damaging for me, on top of that, to have the conversation surrounding them being like, oh, I bet this or I bet that, especially if there was solid evidence against the other person involved. It would just be a real shame. But like I said, that's all we know as of now. That is all the details that we have. And right now, if I just have to go off the information I have right now, it's looking pretty bad for Courtney. I mean, the evidence against her, from what I can tell, is pretty damning. And like I said, like, we might end up changing our opinions when this goes to trial, but There would have to be like such an extreme realignment of perception during this trial. Like they would have to have some sort of evidence against Christian that was like so crazy damning. She is currently in jail right now awaiting trial. The day that she was arrested, she actually transferred all of her money to her dad, who does work in finance, and she claims that this is because like she wouldn't be able to manage her money from inside jail, and so she needed somebody else to. Other people speculate that she may have done this so that her father can bury her money in case Christian's family decides to sue on a civil level in addition to this criminal proceeding. And then that way, if they did sue, she could be like, oh, well, look, I only have like $500 to my name or something, because her dad had effectively buried her finances on her behalf.
Hi guys, I have been a sex worker for the last decade. I go by the name of Paisley Porter. I am very familiar with the industry I work in because I have worked not only for so long in the industry, but pretty much every job there is. I've worked as a dancer, I've worked as an escort, and now I am an adult film star. I also am familiar with many people in the industry as well, one being Courtney Taylor. Not only am I familiar with her because she works in my industry, but I actually grew up with Courtney Taylor. We were never super good friends, but more so acquaintances. And we went to elementary school together and middle school and high school at one point too. What I know about the sex industry is that oftentimes we get very misjudged. Just to give you an idea of like what my day-to-day life is like, I wake up and I go to the gym, I make my daughter breakfast, I drop her off at school, and then I go shoot content or do a professional shoot or whatever I really need to get done for that day. I am done by the time my daughter gets out of school, so I go pick her up. We go do whatever. We go out to dinner, we go to the movies. You know, I go home to my family for holidays. I have a very average, normal life. The only thing different about me is that my 9 to 5 may look a little different than yours. A lot of the industry is this way. Many of us have families, we're married, like we just live a very normal average life. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't really go out. That being said, there is a small portion of the industry, like the 1%, just like any industry. They make the most noise, you know, partying all the time, drinking all the time, getting into trouble, this and that. I'm not gonna make the news for my average white picket fence life, but these people, they do make a lot of noise, and they will. One of these people is obviously Courtney Taylor. She has been in the news a lot lately. Obviously, you know, what happened, it is an ongoing case, but she has been accused of murdering her boyfriend. And little bits and pieces and things keep coming out about her lifestyle with substance abuse, with potentially being violent towards ex-boyfriends and like partying a lot and all these things. And I think a lot of people, they see, oh, she is a sex worker, she must be like a bad person because she's a sex worker. I just want to say these two things have absolutely nothing to do with each other. Yes, she is also a sex worker, but I think the public really likes to have this crazy idea that we have like a pimp and we are abused and beaten and always on drugs and this and that. They just love to have this like view of what our life is like, which has absolutely nothing to do with most of our lives. Because this unfortunate situation happened, I think a lot of people, they're assuming that all of us may be this way and maybe getting into trouble like this and maybe have all the substance abuse issues and stuff. The fact that she was a sex worker is completely unrelated to what happened. The greater majority of us don't get into trouble like this. So it is sad that I feel that the public's perception is affecting this case very negatively. It is rough because she was like a known figure. So everybody's opinions are gonna affect the case whether they say it's going to or not. But again, it really has nothing to do with sex work. Many of us have never experienced a situation such as hers. Another thing about sex work that I have noticed that may or may not have contributed to what happened is that a lot of our relationships at certain points do get toxic. This is because the greater majority of people are monogamous. And a lot of people, like in my very own personal experience and my friends in the industry, guys will date us, and at first they think it's really cool to date like an adult movie star, and they'll brag about it, about getting down with us in bed and like this and that, and they think it's just the coolest thing. And then as time goes on, they start to see, oh, well, I actually like this girl. I'm not so sure if I like the fact that she's with other people on camera. And then all of a sudden it becomes an issue. And so it causes kind of like butting heads a lot, and it sort of like causes a toxic relationship. I've seen this happen time and time again, to the point where it's like a joke in our industry because it just happens so often. So I could see that if she was that 1% that struggled with like substance abuse, and her boyfriend obviously wasn't in the adult industry, but she was, I could see how all these things put together could cause like a lot of stress in their relationship. Obviously that does happen a lot. It causes lots of like toxicity, and obviously like we have to find our right people. Not everyone is built to be able to date an adult star, and that is fine, but unfortunately, sometimes it ends very toxic, like the relationship with Courtney and her boyfriend. So I think that is another thing that could have potentially contributed. But again, you know, I don't know. That is just speaking from what I do know about relationships in the adult industry. So guess we will just have to see.
Well, guys, this concludes our spooky Saturday. Thank you guys for tuning into the whole thing. I really appreciate it. If you don't follow me on TikTok, I have 2 accounts. I have Daisy Foko and I have Daily Foko. If you care about what I'm doing on a daily basis, like lifestyle stuff, Daily Foko is for you. If you're here for more of like my main content of like weird facts, history, stuff like this, then definitely just follow my main Daisy Foko. My Instagram is DaisFoko, DaisFoko. And I also use Threads. I don't really use Twitter or X or whatever. Thank you for tuning in, and don't forget, there's another Mukbang Monday coming up in just 2 days. So if you liked the last one, definitely tune into that. If you haven't watched the last one, you should watch it, because like I had a great time filming it. See you guys next Saturday. Bye.